In this video, we will be replacing the throttle body on this 2003 Toyota Camry. Taking a look inside the engine bay, we're going to focus most of our attention towards the rear of the engine near the firewall. And if we take a look down back behind the engine, we can see that throttle body. And to get a little better access back behind there, I'm going to remove the air filter housing assembly and connecting ductwork. And I'll start by disconnecting the mass airflow sensor, as well as the vacuum switching valve. I then have one additional wiring harness for our vapor canister purge solenoid. And I'll go ahead and remove that vacuum switching valve, but replace that screw so I don't lose it. I have a hose for my PCV system, and I'll loosen up my hose clamp for that ducting, followed by my two 10mm bolts for the air filter cover. And then we should be able to pull that cover off with our air filter. And a few bolts in that lower portion will allow us to remove that from the vehicle. If I take a look in the bottom portion of the air filter housing, I do have 3 bolt locations. And to get a little better access with the camera, I'm going to remove my plastic shield for the valve cover. I'm going to work off that purge solenoid and a couple lines. And if we follow that purge solenoid line, it does connect up with the throttle body. And if I compress that spring clamp, I can gently wiggle off my ducting going into the throttle body. I can then work my evap hose around that ducting and remove that from the engine. And another evap hose on the throttle body. Again, squeezing together that clamp and gently wiggling that off. Next, I have the throttle control motor connector, as well as the wiring retainer holding that in place. And I'm going to use a little bit of Amsoil metal protector on the 4 mounting bolts for the throttle body. This will aid in the removal process and help this go just a little bit easier. And using a rubber mallet, I can work that throttle body free. Now I do still have 2 water bypass hoses that I need to disconnect, and an additional evap hose on the bottom of the throttle body. To remove these, we can release our spring clamps and gently wiggle those hoses off, being careful not to damage the hoses. And with that throttle body removed, we can shift our focus to removing the gasket. This does need to be replaced every time you replace the throttle body. And I always like to compare my new part with my old part just to make sure that they look the same. These are looking pretty good. And we'll do the same with the throttle body. Now I do notice that we do have one line that has been redirected to a different area, but other than that, these look exactly the same. For reassembly, we will begin by installing our new gasket and seating that in place. We then want to reconnect our evap hose as well as both of our water bypass hoses, gently working those on to the hose barb and sliding those clamps into place, and an additional evap hose on top. Next, I'm going to start the mounting bolts by hand first, making sure that I get them threaded loosely into place before I try to put any tools on this. And then snug them down just a little bit with a socket, again by hand. And we'll slip on that mounting bracket on the 4th bolt for our throttle body. And the torque specification is 22 foot-pounds for the throttle body mounting bolts. And we can then begin to hook up some of our other components. Starting with our ducting, we can work that into place and feed our evap line around. Our PCV hose connection with the spring clamp on that one, as well as our purge canister valve. And then that valve cover shroud, followed by the bottom of our air filter housing. Air filter next. Air filter cover. We can then put back that vacuum switching valve. And then our 3 electrical wiring harnesses. And we can then take it for a test drive.